Hello, this is Professor Torsen. This is the recorded lecture for Chapter 18, Conservation and Biodiversity. For this chapter, our learning objectives include understanding what biodiversity is, its value to humans, and how it is distributed around the world. We are going to review the types of extinctions and then discuss factors that make a species more or less likely to go extinct. We're also going to discuss how human activities cause disturbances in the ecosystem and some strategies for preservation and conservation of the environment and species. Biodiversity is the variety or variation of genes, species, and ecosystems on Earth. Conservation biology looks at how we can preserve this biodiversity. Biodiversity is valued by humans extrinsically in terms of provisioning, regulating, habitat, and culture. Biodiversity is greatest along the equator. So this figure 18.5 from your textbook is illustrating how biodiversity is greatest around the equator and decreases as you go further north or further south. Biodiversity hotspots are regions of the world that have significantly higher biodiversity, and these areas also happen to be under threat of destruction, mostly from human activities. On average, species exist for about 10 million years. Of course, there's a huge variety in this value. There are factors that affect the likelihood or the probability of a species to go extinct. These three factors are geographic range, population size, and habitat tolerance. These are illustrated in these figures on slide 5. So the more restricted or the smaller geographic range a species has, the more likely it is to go extinct. In this figure, you can see green represents the wide geographic range of a particular species versus on the right-hand side in red, there is a species that has a very restricted geographic range. So the more spread out, the bigger range a species has, the less likely it is to become extinct. The middle panel illustrates population size. This is pretty intuitive. The more individual organisms you have of a particular species, the harder it is for that species to become extinct, right? If you have more individuals, that's more individuals that must die out in order to cause extinction. And the last panel is illustrating habitat tolerance. Organisms that are able to tolerate a wider range of habitats have a smaller or less likely to go extinct. Currently, we are in the midst of a mass extinction. Some of the stats are summarized here on slide 6. And this current mass extinction is being caused by human activity. So a lot of this is due to habitat loss. Humans are developing larger urban areas, and with an increasing population of humans, we need more and more food. So a lot of habitat is also being lost as forests and fields are clear cut for agricultural purposes. And surprisingly, in the past 25 years, half of the world's rainforests have been destroyed. This is really significant since rainforests have a huge biodiversity. So if half of the world's rainforests have been destroyed, there's a lot of unique organisms that have also been lost. Disturbances to the ecosystem can be reversible or irreversible. Reversible disturbances may alter components of the habitat, both biotic and abiotic, which are living and not living components, but they don't cause extinction of any species. So reversible disturbances are fine because they do not lead to extinction of species. An example of this from your textbook is Mount St. Helens erupting. When it erupted back in 1980, it caused a huge disturbance to the environment, but over time, the environment of Mount St. Helens has recovered. So plants have started to regrow and wildlife has returned to the area. Irreversible disturbances are changes to habitats that cause a species to go extinct. And of course, once a species is extinct, it is gone. So these are irreversible disturbances. There are 4 different ways human activities damage the environment. The first way is humans will introduce non-native species. Sometimes this is by accident, and sometimes this is intentional. In either case, introducing a species that was not previously in that particular habitat can lead to significant repercussions. These non-native or exotic species may have no natural predators or pathogens in a new habitat, and therefore it is difficult to control the population of that exotic species. Here in figure 18, we are looking at an example of an intentional introduction of an invasive species. So the cane toad was introduced in Australia to try to control insect populations as they tried to add a lot more farmland and agricultural to the area. And these cane toads were able to populate the area very successfully because they really didn't have any natural predators in that area. A second way human activity damages the environment is acid rain. So we learned about acids and bases and pH way back in Unit 1. pH measures how acidic or basic a solution is, and the scale goes from 0 to 14. pH of 7 is neutral, and anything less than 7 is considered acidic. This figure from your textbook is showing you the distribution of acid rain in the United States. You can see on the West Coast, all the way through the Midwest, the pH of rain is slightly acidic with a pH of 5 to 5.3 or so. And the further east you go, the more acidic the rain is. And these red areas are areas in which the pH of rain is 4.3. So that is well into the acidic range. Now, acid rain is caused largely from the burning of fossil fuels. Burning of fossil fuels releases gases like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. And these gases react with water that is in the atmosphere to produce sulfuric acid and nitric acid. These acids then fall to the earth when it rains. So acid rain damages the environment directly when acidic rainwater damages whatever living tissue it contacts, so tree leaves or grasses. Acid rain can also damage the environment indirectly. Acid rain actually pulls essential ions and nutrients from the soil, and so then plants have less access to those ions and nutrients in the soil. And these leached ions are then taken through the water cycle and start to collect in areas like lakes and streams. And that leads to higher acidity levels in those bodies of water. And of course, any change in pH can be harmful to living organisms because living organisms are used to a particular environment. A third way human activities damage the environment is the production of greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are what is underlying global warming. Here in this figure 1824 from your textbook, we see the greenhouse effect in action. So this large yellow arrow indicates energy from the sun that is coming to Earth. Some of this energy is absorbed by Earth and some of this energy is reflected. So you see this yellow arrow extending back out away from Earth. Some of this reflected energy will escape, but some of it will actually get trapped by the Earth's atmosphere. So here we see trapped heat in the figure, and that is what is leading to global warming. So in fact, the average temperature on Earth has increased very rapidly. It's been increasing since the mid to late 1800s and the result of the Industrial Revolution. And it's really been increasing rapidly over the last 50 years. We can see this indirectly by looking at images of the polar ice caps. So here in this figure, we are looking at two images of the polar ice caps, one taken in 1979 and the other taken in 2016. And there is a significant loss in the ice cap. Biological systems are already showing the effects of climate change. We have seen trees and flowers blooming earlier and earlier as the earth gets warmer and warmer. Migratory birds are arriving at their summer ranges earlier. And some species, including birds and butterflies, are expanding their geographic ranges. And of course, as we just saw on the previous slide, Arctic ice is thinning and melting. And one factor that often goes overlooked is that this can lead to changes in the distribution of certain infectious diseases. So for example, the range of ticks which cause Lyme disease have been changing, and therefore regions that didn't have issues with ticks and Lyme disease are now discovering that they are currently having issues with ticks and Lyme disease. The fourth way human activities damage the environment is deforestation. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in this chapter, but there are large areas in the world where humans are clear-cutting forests. This is due to development of urban areas or development of agriculture. Deforestation causes the direct loss of living organisms, but it also will cause an increase in the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. This is because, and we remember this from Unit 2, but in photosynthesis, plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in order to synthesize carbohydrates. If there are fewer trees and fewer plants, that means there is less carbon dioxide being absorbed from the atmosphere. Accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a major cause of global warming. So deforestation will accelerate this warming of the globe. In terms of solving climate change, well, there is no easy button. Some things to consider when addressing climate change include identifying and protecting the areas with the most biodiversity, reducing fossil fuel consumption, reducing deforestation, and increasing energy efficiency of our homes and cars. Recently, new technologies are also being developed to try to trap or absorb some of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. In the past, conservation biology has focused on preserving particular species. So think of the Endangered Species Act. Now, however, there has been a shift to focus on conserving habitats. So by conserving the habitat or the ecosystem, we will then conserve the living organisms. This concludes the recorded lecture for Chapter 18. Thanks for watching.